First, we'll open public hearings. The first one on the list is House Bill 36. And I'm guessing the sponsor is here. So come on up, introduce yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm filling in for the prime sponsor, Sally Fellows, who is actually on her way to a doctor's appointment in Hanover this morning. So for the record, my name is Diane Schuett. I represent Merrimack 12, the town of Pembroke. And if I may, I will read what Sally Fellows was going to say to you had she been here. Last year, during the county budgeting process, I learned of 2021 enabling legislation giving counties the option to annually adjust sheriff's fees based on the rate of inflation. I also learned that the language describing how to determine that rate could be interpreted in more than one way. It could mean the change in the Consumer Price Index from May to June, just 1 month. It could mean the CPI in June compared to the prior June, or it could mean the average CPI of a 12-month period ending in June compared to the average CPI of the prior 12 months. So I worked with the Sheriff's Association to select the method that would work best for all counties, since some budget for a calendar year and others budget for a July to June year. The only change made by this bill is use of a 12-month calendar year CPI rather than a 12-month July to June CPI. The annual calendar CPI number is published by the U.S. Department of Labor. A July to June 12-month CPI would need to be calculated by the sheriffs. Annual CPI change is already used in several New Hampshire RSAs, and she has the sites below. The rest of the bill edits provide precise instructions for calculations. Calculating the rate of inflation is definitely challenging for anyone not familiar with labor statistics, so I have drafted step-by-step instructions. I'm sorry I cannot be at this hearing to answer questions, but feel free to call me, and she's listed her phone number and her email. And I will try to answer any questions, but I have to tell you all, she is the mathematician, not I.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it looks like we have Rishardi, come on up.
Thank you. My name is Dominic Ricciardi. I do have to correct that I'm not a lifelong resident. I'm a lifelong visitor, and I've lived here for 34 years in New Hampshire. I've spent 33 years in law enforcement in New Hampshire and currently the sheriff of Carroll County. I'm here today to testify in support of HB 36 for the New Hampshire Sheriff's Association. This is in regards to SB 77 that was passed in 2021 by the House and Senate. That bill increased fees for certain services of sheriffs and deputy sheriffs. The fees had not been increased since 2010, and as you know, the inflation rate has increased in every aspect of service. This past summer, Representative Sally Fellows identified a concern that how the bill was implemented. Therefore, you see House Bill 36 before you for your consideration. The language makes a modification to RSA 104:31 Roman numeral 13, to read as follows. The fees of the sheriffs and deputy sheriffs specified in paragraphs 1 through 4 and paragraphs 7 through 9-B may be increased once annually by a vote of the county convention. The percentage of the increase shall not exceed the annual percentage increase in the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers Northeast region, as published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, United States Department of Labor, for the calendar year preceding the vote. The effective date would be asked to be effective 60 days after the passage. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I ask that this House Bill 36 ought to pass. Thanks for your consideration, Dominic Ricciardi, and I am the president of the Sheriff's Association.
Questions from the committee members? All right, seeing none, in the future, please don't read the bill. You know, that's one of the things
Okay.
we're supposed to do.
Yeah,
So
I'm sorry.
make it easier for you.
All right, thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak on this issue? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and we have a few minutes before we open the next one, I think. Let me look. So we don't have any time, all right. So. I forgot that I scheduled them that close together. All right, so we'll open the public hearing on 286. And as soon as I get the sheet. Thank you. We'll ask the prime sponsor to come up and introduce.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Representative Jerry Cannon. I represent Stratford County District 12. That's Somersworth and Rollinsford. Over the past few years of being a representative and a school board member, I would go down to the Public Works office periodically during our campaign season to pick up campaign signs that may have been put in the wrong place. Sometimes by myself, but a lot of times by friends that were helping me out. The same was true for many of the other candidates. So in the past, I had picked up any of the signs that were associated with fellow members of the same party and helped them out, not just the local candidates, but the state as well as U.S. candidates. And hadn't had a problem until this past year when the Public Works Director was out on medical leave and his supervisor was in charge. Supervisor read the statute, RSA 664:17, which indicated that only the candidate could retrieve the signs for themselves. And that's all he let me do. I got signs that had my name on them alone. I was able to go to the city hall and talk with the city manager, and he assured me that I would be able to get the signs for fellow representatives and candidates. And he met me at the Public Works Department and let me pick up the signs. The supervisor had held out a copy of the RSA to show this is the way it's supposed to be. And I looked at him, I said, well, that's the way it hasn't been. And he said, well, this is the way it's supposed to be because I'm in charge. So I checked with other candidates, and they'd had similar problems in other locations. So I decided I would put forth this bill, which would allow the candidate, a member of the candidate's campaign, a local political committee of the same party, to allow us to pick up those signs. And then, especially at the end of the cycle, was to redistribute those signs to the respective candidates so they would have them for the future if they decided to run again. So that's essentially what this bill is, relatively simple. And I'm available for questions.
Questions for the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on House Bill 286? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing, and we're almost on track for the next one. We're keeping you busy. They're being easy on you and writing the notes. Take a little extra time. All right, we're going to open the public hearing on House Bill 296. And prime sponsor, okay. If you'd introduce yourself, thank you.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chair, Senators. My name is Thomas Walsh. I'm a representative from Merrimack County, District 10, which are the towns of Hooksett and Dunbarton. This morning I'm here to introduce House Bill 296, relative to the local authority for granting driveway permits. I think the easiest way for me to explain why I introduced this bill, I'll just give you a quick example. I've also been on the planning board in Hooksett for 12 years. And we did a subdivision, approved a subdivision a couple of years ago that allowed for 14-foot driveways. So we had a few people, obviously they got bought up and built, and my phone started ringing. One of them, because it was time for CO, now they had construction loans. When they went to get their CO, the fire department decided that now they wanted a 20-foot driveway versus the ordinance that we followed when we did the subdivision of 14 feet. So it was problematic, and obviously the constituent was very upset. The money that had been expended to build the 14-foot driveway was gone. They needed to sign their documents in a timely fashion, and there was a DES permit that would have needed to been increased if they wanted to widen the driveway. So I don't usually do one-off bills, but we tried solving this in town to no avail. So therefore, I went and did the only other thing that I saw fit. So what this does originally was to say that the fire code can't supersede the ordinance. When, at the time this all occurred, we were still operating under NFPA 1 2015, which didn't really specify, I've researched it a few times, other people have, residential driveways. The only thing that was there was Section 18, which refers to driver access roads, which I guess as the AHJ, he felt he could use the driver access road section to apply to longer driveways. Since then, we have adopted 2018, which does include a residential component, but it still starts the minimum, it starts the driveway at 20 feet wide, and if the AHJ sees fit, can reduce the number. I just see that backwards. So where we are now, we did amend it in the House. I've been working closely with Marshall Toomey, and I can't speak highly enough about him. We narrowed it down in the House to just be single and two-family homes. I didn't want to get into commercial or high density. That's not what I was going after. And it did get out of the House, unanimous out of Public Works, and then on voice vote on the consent calendar for the full House. As of recent, I guess he's been doing some other communicating, and I guess there were some other potential issues that some of the other fire chiefs had around the state, and everybody has their own unique situation. So he has actually given me some proposed language, if you would entertain, And I can hand out copies of what he's proposing.
If you would, before you go into it, so that
Yep.
we'll be able to look at it at the time, you just,
3, 4, 5, 6. And again, this is just, I've been trying
if
to
you'd
work.
hold up just a minute so we get it. Go ahead, thank you.
Okay, what's not highlighted obviously was the adopted version from the House. The highlighted portion is what's been suggested, which I have no issue with. It does keep everybody in the loop, but it still looks at the ordinance with the exceptions of any issues they may have. Again, without taking up too much of your time, that's a basic reason for this bill, and in working with Marshall Toomey, I think we've come up with something that works for everybody. And that's all I've got.
Okay, so just the quick read says that they will consider it, doesn't say
Yep.
anything more than that.
Right, and OLS may have a different choice of terms, but that's the direction.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Perkins Spoken.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Representative, for being here. So I appreciate the story of sort of why we've brought this, but obviously, I mean, there's just so many different circumstances that arise in sort of planning and building different kinds of housing. So I know one of the suggestions in the correspondence we received was to sort of accomplish your goal, I think, which is to help create perhaps a more predictable process, to sort of bring that concern to the Board of Fire Control, where sort of all the public safety concerns around making a change like this could be raised. Could you just talk a little bit about whether a fire code amendment might be something you're open to instead?
Instead, the marshal and I spoke about it in terms of him doing it through rules and codes. We didn't disagree on it, but I can tell you that on the House side, we're looking at a lot of different things, including what I do in DMV and the Department of Safety, into codifying things in statute versus rules. So without having a solution and the time frame issues with the rule change, I decided to move forward with the statute.
Okay, and then,
And this actually just puts it right underneath the same exception we have to the codes for single and two-family fire sprinklers.
okay, thank you, that's helpful. Just to follow up if I may.
Additional question, yes?
Yeah, and I mean, is there in your mind a sort of uniform way that the zoning ordinances and the state fire code kind of interact across our towns and cities? Because, you know, I see this as guidance, but my concern, to be frank, is that, you know, there are situations where trucks are not going to have access to our residences. And I say this as a longtime housing advocate. I mean, there's challenges on the other side where we want to make sure we're not overbuilding either, you know? So I know there's two sides to this, but, you know, I guess I just am concerned, having been in land use for 15 years, that it's trying to apply sort of a one-size-fits-all, you know, just really kind of leaves the fire chiefs on a local level with their hands tied.
Well, I don't know if this leaves it a one-size-fits-all, because the recommendations are there. The fire chiefs or designee safety also still has an opportunity at our TRC meetings, our technical review committee, which
Yeah.
is done beforehand. And there's also plenty of room and plenty of opinions given when we actually create the ordinance to begin with. So what I'm trying to do with this is not to have people surprised at the end, and that's really the crux of it. In terms of overbuilding, I mean, right now we have a minimum of 12 feet. I don't see Hooksett changing to 12. We're at 14. It's worked fine for us. But both the marshal and I agreed, too, that when you look at the 20 feet that's in the code, you're asking people to build a highway to get to their house, and that's not fair either. So I do think that's overbuilding. I mean, even a lane on the highway is 12 feet wide. So I think the way it's structured, with the recommendations of the chief prior to approvals, I think does work for everybody.
Just one more, if I may, Chair. Yeah.
Absolutely, Senator.
And thank you for your thoughtful responses. Would you believe, or is my understanding that I think the 20-foot minimum was repealed in favor of a more flexible standard in the latest fire code, which might
No,
address some of your
it's still
concerns.
20
Okay.
feet, but it just allows the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, to reduce it if he sees fit.
Yeah,
So this basically looks at it from the other direction. It's minimum of 12 feet unless the AHJ has a reason to make it wider. And so I think that's fair.
okay, maybe someone behind you can address
Thank
that
you.
as well. All right, thank you, Representative.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next on the list, we have three chiefs. You guys want to come up together, or? Because we don't want you repeating, so it's easier for me if you come up together. Yeah, just pull one of the chairs up. If you'd all introduce yourself first, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dave Emanuel. I'm the fire chief in Durham and the vice president of the New Hampshire Association of Fire Chiefs.
Good morning. Tom Blanchett. I'm the fire chief in the town of Loudon.
Good morning, Chief Jones, Meredith Fire, also second vice president, New England Fire Chiefs.
All right.
We are before you. We have been working with Representative Walsh and Fire Marshal Sean Toomey as House Bill 296 has been introduced. And the long and short is when we read the issue to correct who is responsible, whether it's a land use board or the authority having jurisdiction, and put it all in the land use board and take a number of considerations and simplify it down into just a driveway width. Our concern is that the other considerations for the fire code and the life safety code, such as slope and grade, vertical clearance, surface load-bearing capacity, turning radius, dead ends, and bridges, could be left behind because you could read into the law that driveway width is the only thing that's important. And from a fire chief or a municipal standpoint, to not be able to service our residents is problematic for us. Firefighters are problem solvers. We want to be able to get to a house to resolve the issue and then leave. And when we can't do that due to barriers beyond our control, we find it very challenging. And it's not fair for the residents to have an expectation that emergency services can help them when we cannot get to them. So simple issues like house numbering and driveway access are of paramount importance to us. We're concerned because we did look at this as a one-size-fits-all, and since I've been in the fire chief, I've had two different challenges that have been very weighty on me. One being personnel issues, the second being driveway access. And in Durham, we have a number of premier properties with long, difficult driveways to access. And you know, our larger problem is that they're legacy subdivisions that have been approved. And we totally acknowledge that this is both a safety issue and a planning and building issue, that we need to work together. And what we ask is that we address it on a local level, on a case-by-case, because short of the code, there's no one answer that will address all of our issues. And I'll pass it off to the next chief. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and Senators. I just want to touch on an incident. Basically, I passed out some pictures that we recently had here in Meredith, and we need to understand that as we go around the state, there are various levels of fire service from career to call volunteer in rural areas, suburban areas. So we really need to keep that in mind. But when the bill was introduced, it would take local authorities would be removed to assist with regulating driveways with detachment to family dwelling units and structures used for residential purposes. Fire chiefs must be allowed to continue an integral role to determine proper fire department access to all properties, including detached 1 and 2 family residential dwellings. Today, fires are burning hotter and faster. That's a known fact due to building construction materials that are being used, open design concepts that we see routinely, increased square footage, and contents which we choose to purchase every day that play a major role. Most all call and volunteer departments are struggling with staffing issues today. It's a known fact. These challenging fire service leaders to alter fire ground tactics to do more with less. These are challenging times for most departments. Limiting required access designs for fire department apparatus and staffing is a step in the wrong direction. In many cases, adds stress and exertion to firefighters, creating safety issues and injuries with added cost to municipalities. With improper access, apparatus is restricted, creating more work for firefighters. On February 22nd, we experienced an emergency call for smoke detector activation. A 1.3, I repeat, a 1.3 mile driveway to this property proved to be very challenging with 90-degree turns, steep grade, narrow width, and a hard, icy packed condition. The incident was immediately declared a working residential building fire. The residential access was assessed at $2 million in value, 7,000 square foot, partially sprinkled with limiting staffing response and limiting fire department access. No aerial apparatus was attempted to gain access to support fire ground tactics. Firefighters' safety during venting and extinguishing the roof became very intensive with ground ladders only. Firefighters had to be transported in and out of this by pickup as weather changed, increasing hazardous conditions, and created a total nightmare. It took 2.5 hours for us to get 3 pieces of apparatus back to the road. DPW assisted with several yards of sand using multiple trucks, and finally requiring the loader to travel from the municipality town of Meredith out to this rural area 9 miles to haul 2 engines out of this area. This kept 3 pieces of apparatus out of service for an extended period of time, requiring additional support from mutual aid departments, tying up others as well. This is just one example of fire department access and its importance for proper design and approval. There are others where apparatus mirrors have been ripped off due to restricted width, apparatus body damage due to narrow restricted entrances. I encourage and recommend this committee to work with all stakeholders, come together with final compromise we can all adhere to. Thank you for your time and this consideration.
Good morning, and thank you for the committee for letting us testify this morning. I come from one of the smaller departments with some, I guess I would term legacy issues. We were a call department that has slowly transitioned into a combination department. During the day, that means there's a chief, a deputy chief, and 2 people on the floor to respond to incidents within our community. I'm also inherently aware of the housing shortage in the state. Our community is one that is typically an older community with an average age of 49.7. Most of our youth live in the city of Concord or outlying communities. So for us to have youthful members of our department is oftentimes a challenge. Our planning and zoning boards typically had approved most all subdivisions and building prior to my being appointed to chief in 2019. And since that time, we've tried to be a little bit proactive about how we do things and reasonable as well, working with homeowners. Most of the good land in Loudoun has been used up. We deal with an immense amount of steep slope issues within our community. And I brought a few pictures this morning just to, give a clearer picture of what we have dealt with. And the first one is an unfortunate situation. It was approved before my tenure. But the first picture I would show, this is a house that's valued at in excess of $400,000, typical average home in New Hampshire now for new construction. And that's the finished paved driveway. So I'd like to submit that to the committee. When we became aware that this house was getting close for CO, we went out and did our inspections and noticed right away that the driveway might be a little bit of a problem. So we brought our aerial device out. Aerial devices are very important in today's world, as Chief Jones indicated, with current fireground tactics and strategies. With many people moving to solar panels on their roofs, that typically fills up 50% of the roof. And a lot more people burning with wood instead of oil and LPG, as we know. So a lot more chimney fires in the past few years than we've seen in the past. And with limited staffing, throwing ground ladders to suppress a chimney fire is quite labor intensive and sometimes a safety concern. So getting an aerial device in is rather important. So on that same driveway, I just backed our tower truck into the driveway because that's how you would have to approach it to be able to use the aerial device. And as you can see, we can't even get the aerial into this house. It's a 185-foot long driveway. Just another picture of a side shot of the aerial, it just, there's no way you're gonna put that truck into this driveway. And this truck is a 100-foot tower. It's typical of most communities in the state. And just another wider view of that same shot with our road agent even there with us going, we gotta do something about this. So as a community, we worked, and to show our community's willingness to work with people, understanding that the amount of land that's in the community is limited, and understanding the need for housing, we've put together a driveway profile that I think would work for about any piece of property within reason. And it allows for a negative 17 or a positive 17% grade, which is pretty steep. But with that, we've included some landings and profiles that accommodates the road agent's need for drainage. So far, since we've implemented this, it's worked out relatively well for most people with limited concern. We're a big proponent in Loudon of like a 16-foot usable surface. So like 14-foot minimum pavement potentially, or drivable surface, and then a foot maintained on either side. And one of the primary reasons for that is when you look at most of these 100-foot aerial devices, which are common with most fire departments, when you deploy the outriggers, they go out 16 feet. So as we reduce building lots in many of these communities where people place their septic systems, oftentimes is right near their driveway. And the worst thing in the world would be to put an outrigger out onto a septic system that we don't know in the heat of a moment at a fire scene, and have firefighters working on it, have the aerial device actually tip and damage the house and potentially injure firefighters. So that would be one of the major reasons for having that width. Another prime example of working with community members is we had a couple more houses. They're $800,000 homes that were just recently finished. This one here has a straight driveway right into a 2-car garage. There's absolutely no landing zone at all. We did work with that homeowner a little bit. He did give us a 25-foot platform at the top so we can set a piece of apparatus at the top of the driveway. But with that, that means we have to extend a 250-foot, 2.5-inch long hose to the house and then attach what we would call a high-rise pack to that with another 150-foot line to make an initial attack. Once again, very labor-intensive when you show up with a limited staffing. The house next door, because the contractor actually let us do a drill to show him and the developer how much work it was to extend that line, he fixed it on the house right above it. And basically, this is a sister house. It's got a driveway that goes down the front of the house. It's 12 feet wide to the garage, and we were fine with that. We let the 12 feet go because we're never going to put a piece of apparatus there because it's going to be in the collapse zone of the house if it was to have a substantial structure fire. But what they did at the top of the driveway is they gave us a 24-foot wide, 35-foot platform before that driveway went down along the side of the house, and they were more than willing to do that. And that's just one example of compromise that can come out of it. And if this bill as written was to pass, that would really inhibit our ability to compromise in many of these situations. So I would encourage the committee to consider the testimony that's been presented and look at it from our perspective as well. I think most of the fire chiefs in the state are very cognizant of the housing issue and the cost associated with that. Asphalt's real money, we know that, but there's some operational and logistical aspects that we just can't overcome on a typical day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Just in closing, we recognize that risk is mitigated through good planning codes and standards and cooperation at the local level. We know that if you don't have sprinklers, you need to have access. If you have sprinklers, you don't need as much access. As every time we make a decision on what we govern for the state of New Hampshire, it changes the tools available both to the municipality and the homeowners. We welcome the opportunities to work further with your committee, Representative Walsh, or the Fire Marshal's office, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Okay, starting off the questions, I will do that. Have you guys seen the proposed amendment that the fire marshal has worked with Representative Walsh?
Yes.
And comments?
Our first thought was to proceed through administrative code and keep it out of the legislation. Would be our first choice if we had an option.
Next question is, do each of you, your communities have a technical review group where the fire and police and others have input into the process?
Yes.
We do. The unfortunate thing is we're not always able to participate due to staffing during the day. Sometimes we're on calls when those meetings happen, so we lose our opportunity.
Yeah, it's basically the same with me. In most cases, as it is presented to department reps.
Mr. Chair, one of the other positions that's been represented is, we are minorities as we are career fire chiefs. Most of the state is represented by volunteer fire chiefs, and they do not all have career planners as well. So a volunteer land use board and process may be not as smooth as it is in a community where all the positions are staffed. And it's easier, if the process is in place to address these issues, it becomes less challenging. Does that answer your question?
Well, the question had to do with whether each of you had a TRG, and the answer to that was yes. So,
In our 3 communities, yes, sir.
other questions from the committee? Senator Perkins Coker.
Thank you, Chair. So, gentlemen, you probably have colleagues from other communities around the state. Is your experience that the fire department is brought in at a uniform and early time to have their contributions recognized in land use approvals?
That's a great question. I don't have a uniform response on that, because with a new subdivision or new land use project, we are involved at the TRG level. One of the places this would get us is on a legacy subdivision, maybe on Great Bay, for instance, where there's 3 existing houses and you go to build a 4th one. And now that you have, the code says more than this many dwellings, you need to have fire department access. And it changes all the rules, which is, for an 80s or 90s approved subdivision, it's very difficult.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, chiefs.
Thank you
Is
for your
there anyone
consideration.
else that wants to testify in this bill?
Thank you.
Seeing none, we will close the public hearing, and in just a minute, we will open the next public hearing. Did we lose Representative Cahill? Oh, he's hiding back there. Okay. We'll open the public hearing on House Bill 335, and we have the prime sponsor here, who will introduce himself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Representative Michael Cahill from Newmarket, and I represent the towns of Newmarket and Newfields, Rockingham 10. I have with me today a constituent who requested this bill, Ms. Jane Sanders, who also requested a related bill that we did last year. I think that was HB 126, and they address a similar topic. This is the tax liens, and very few people are involved in providing this service to our municipalities. And what we asked for last time was a 2-week extension on the deadline, but we missed one. And this particular type of tax lien is what we address in HB 335.
Questions from the committee members? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The only other one is Ms. Sanders. Have a
Good
seat.
morning. Good morning,
We do have your
Senators.
written testimony.
And I did bring 6 copies as well.
Well, we've all got it, so.
Okay. Oh, good, good. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm one of only 3 people that I know of providing this service to the cities and towns. And more are outsourcing this work. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Jane Sanders. I'm from Newmarket, New Hampshire. And I do mortgagee searches for New Hampshire cities and towns when they put their property tax liens on or when deeding is impending. So there's plenty of work to go around, but very few of us who are actually doing it. So having the extension in time has been very important to meeting the deadlines. So this particular RSA was missed when the proposal was made last time. So just
Okay,
bringing it
question?
in line. Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Well,
Is
thank
there
you
anyone
very
else
much for
that
your
wants to
time.
testify on this bill? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll open the next one in just a minute. I want you to know, Representative Cahill, that you owe the committee assistant a big thank you, because she's the one that convinced me that we should add your bill per your request, so. Especially since this is her first day back since her operation, so, yeah. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members
Just-
of the committee.
I haven't gotten the okay yet. All right. I've gotten permission to say yes.
Yep, thank you. I'm being married for many years, I understand. We will wait for permission, and this works out for the best. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. I remain Michael Cahill from Rockingham 10, the towns of Newfields and Newmarket. And what we have today with HB 336 is a small change in language on the ballots. It really has the same meaning, but, you know, words and context have a different. I think this would be more positive and perhaps more encouraging for the voter when they look at the multitude of state representatives on their ballot. I know a couple of you have been in the other body, and you may have noted that after the state senator, things kind of drop off because there are so many options. And with this language, we tell the voter that you may vote for up to, rather than not more than, which sounds kind of forbidding, but up to the number of seats that are available. And then for further information, we say that that number will be elected. So whether you choose to fill in none or the full number, or if you write in Tom Brady or Daffy Duck, they're not likely to win, but the people on the ballot are likely to win. And that's where we're trying to encourage people to pay a bit more attention to the state representatives who do similar work to the state senators for similar wages. And we enjoy it. It's very rewarding. As we know, for those people who work for the state, money is not everything. But I think this might be helpful to the voters who will, better understand what's at stake when they're going on that ballot. Many people just vote for the top tier and just that's enough for them. But perhaps if they see this other language, they'll fill out the ballot in its entirety and have more involvement in the process.
Questions from the committee? Since we don't have anyone on the list from Secretary of State's office, and we don't have anybody from Secretary of State's office here, what communications have you had with them?
I have worked with the Secretary of State's office, and I believe I can speak with some confidence that Secretary Scanlon approves of the language, thinks it would be a good step. And in fact, the Deputy Secretary worked with me when there was a bit of a kerfuffle with the punctuation on the original bill. So there was an amendment to fix that, and so she was a co-author. Ms. Hennessy was a co-author on the amendment, although not listed on there as such.
Additional questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
I thank you.
Is there anyone else that wants to testify on this bill? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Do I have a motion to go into executive session? Second. We have a motion by Senator Susi, second by Senator Murphy to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, we are in executive session. Certainly, Senator Abbas couldn't be here today because of a commitment. That just means that anything that you do can't go on the consent calendar, but I'll leave it up to you. House Bill 36.
Second?
Senator Susie moves ought to pass. Seconded by Senator Perkins Cuoco. This is the feast of the sheriff. There's no amendments on the bill. Any discussion?
Seems like a helpful clarification so that we can use a published rate for CPI.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. And Senator Susie? You get to take that one out. Any other ones that the committee wants to deal with today?
Tackle 286.
All right. The political advertising. Do we have any discussion or a motion?
I move all to pass.
TP by Senator Murphy, seconded by Senator Susie. Additional discussion?
I would just say, Mr. Chairman, that I think we've all run for office, obviously, and I think this recognizes current practice in most places. So I would support it.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. And Senator Murphy,
Yes, sir.
you get to take it out. Any other motions that you guys want to make or discussion?
House Bill 335.
335.
I would move all to pass.
Second?
All right. Senator Susie moves ought to pass. Senator Perkins Cuoco, second. And are you also moving, or this one wasn't the amendment? Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I'll take this one out. I gotta take one out every once in a while.
That's true. Should we address 336 while we're here?
336.
Chairman, I would move ought to pass on HB 336.
Senator Perkins Cuoco, seconded by Senator Susie, ought to pass. Okay. Further discussion?
I know that the representative who is prime sponsor on this bill spends a lot of time making sure that our state representative elections are paid attention to. I think the spirit of this bill is good, and knowing that the Secretary of State has worked with him on the language gives me comfort that this is a good improvement.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Senator Perkins Cuoco.
I'll get one.
Well, it depends. The only one you've got left is the driveway permits.
It might be prudent to wait, Mr. Chairman. It sounds like there's some good work being done.
Okay.
Do you have any comments, Mr. Chair?
Well, after reading the amendment, proposed amendment, and looking at driveways that are in excess of 150 feet not being part of this, and a few of the other things that, you know, I think that it is a reasonable compromise. I think that, you know, most places do have some kind of a technical review group, and although we heard testimony that, you know, possibly in some of these smaller towns, that, you know, even in the chief from Loudon, I believe it is, that he may not be there when the technical group, but this says that, you know, if he has an issue, he's going to be able to provide the written testimony, you know, for the land use board, which would be either the zoning board or the planning board, depending on whether it's a conditional or an exception that is needed, you know, for the structure to be built. So again, you can't, you know, at what point do you say you can't use your land if I don't have a way to get to a particular place that doesn't have a slope of less than 17, okay? Slope of 17 is, you know, fairly large slope. I mean, I think the roads are, I think they limit them like 12%, but don't quote me, just doing that from memory. So, you know, the bill as amended, I'm not opposed to, and that certainly, if I did everything the fire chiefs wanted, I would be hiring a fireman to sit in my front room 24 hours a day to protect me from the fires. But that and the sprinkler system and the cistern, you know, to back up the city water and et cetera. So I personally believe that the proposed amendment is reasonable. And if there's no objections to that, I'll probably get that drafted for the committee so that you can see it.
Sure. Since there isn't an FN, I think another week might be helpful.
Sure. All righty. With that, I'll take a motion to come out of executive session. Have a motion by Senator Susie, seconded by Senator Murphy to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and our business of the day being completed, we are adjourned.